Welcome to the Art of Procurement, the official podcast of the Catalyst Co community. And our purpose is to enhance the impact of procurement by elevating the discussion one conversation at a time. Here at Art of Procurement, Catalysts come together every single week to share their challenges, ideas, successes, and perspectives on the business of procurement. Hi there, I hope you're doing well today. I'm the host of the Art of Procurement, Philip Eidson. Welcome to the show. And no doubt, if you're a regular listener, you'll notice something new about our introduction and a reference to the Catalystco community. So we created Catalystco as the new entity under which all of the work that we do here at Art of Procurement and Palmbridge fits under. Now, I don't want to spend too much of this introduction going deeper. However, if you are interested in applying to join an early access program for our soon-to-be-launched flagship offer, which is the Catalystco platform, I'm going to share a little bit more details about that at the end of the show. Well, over the last couple of months, I've actually been receiving a lot of feedback from listeners who are concerned about the potential impact of tariffs and of escalating trade wars. In particular, two questions keep coming up. One is, what can we do to protect ourselves against tariffs? And two, what options do we have when tariffs are levied on the products or materials that I buy? And so to help answer those questions, among many others that I asked him, I reached out to Bill Michels. Bill is a recognized expert in purchasing and supply chain management. He's worked in procurement across a wide spectrum of different industries and countries, transforming procurement and the supply chain. Until recently, Bill was the CEO and founder of Aripart Consulting after more than 23 years at ADR North America. Under his leadership, ADR North America became a leading niche specialty consulting firm and won several recognitions and awards. Well, this is also Bill's third appearance on the show, but it has been a couple of years since he last joined us. And so I started by asking Bill if he could just share an update since the last time we recorded a podcast together.
Hey, Phil, it has been a long time. And since I last talked to you, I moved on to a different role, in CIPS. And that's been outstanding. We find that there's a lot of people in the marketplace that are looking for a place to go to get some more materials, and I'm seeing an increase in membership, and it's a very, very positive step for people in the procurement profession. So I'm excited about what I'm doing, and I'm having a good time, and still doing a lot of research and a lot of things, and happy to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm interested in CIPS making an investment in the States because it's really been the one region of the world where they perhaps haven't penetrated as well as other regions. What was some of the thinking behind coming to the States for CIPS?
Well, some of the thinking is we do service customers all over the world. We have some large multinational clients that are having staff all over the world that are certified, and they wanted consistencies in their program, and they were asking CIPS to come in. And you can't really be a global company without really being strong in North America, particularly the United States. So there are lots of opportunities or offers to collaborate with different groups, and none of them wanted to collaborate. So at this point, CIPS decided to open an office, and the board decided to make an investment. Mm-hmm. And they're continuing with a very strong investment as we see the growth.
Now, I have to ask, as I think about procurement, learning and development, there's a lot about, I think maybe the historical way of learning is certification programs, but it seems to me that there's a little bit of a switch to a more blended approach. It's not just about the certificate. I just wonder if that's your experience as well.
Well, my experience personally is that a lot of the clients that are coming in now are actually clients looking to solve a lot of problems. So there's 4 generations in the workforce, and they want to find a learning mechanism to handle a workforce where baby boomers are leaving and millennials are coming in and Generation Z's coming in. So some of the things we've been asked to do is come up and solve this problem with unique focused programs to help them develop. So we're doing some work in Silicon Valley, we're doing some work all over the place. So I think you're right. I think there's still a group that looks for certification. They look for, once you hit a level, how do you continue to learn? How do you continue to grow in your career, and what makes a difference? And so I still think you find quite a large group of people that for themselves want to go to certification as individuals, drive the certification, and the companies like that as well, because it's showing continuing improvement and someone that's anxious to learn and can keep up with what's going on in the world.
Yeah, you from a team perspective, it's showing that you have people who want to invest in their own self-development, if that's a route that they want to go down.
Sure, and if the company pays, the company's making additional investments in them. So, and if you've got a certification program that's rigorous enough and degree level, then you see people really look at it as an opportunity to grow and see that they can at least achieve a different level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted today to talk a little bit about tariffs, and that was really why I reached out and invited you onto the show, because I'm hearing from a lot of listeners some concern about, how to react and how to respond to a lot of the issues that are going on right now with the global economy, with tariffs now being added to a number of products and talk of trade wars. And this is something that hasn't happened for a long time. So there's a lot of folks who don't have the experience of going through this before, and aren't really sure how to respond. And I know that just through your experience in the supply chain area, it's something that you have a deep background on. So this is probably a basic question around tariffs, but from a big picture perspective, why do governments put tariffs on products and services?
Well, I think the government puts tariffs on goods and services to try and stimulate the industries in their own country. So they're trying to increase employment and trying to stimulate the industries. But I look at tariffs, and having lived with tariffs before, there are a lot of dynamics that happen that kind of influence us in the procurement world. So let's take an example like the steel and aluminum tariff. So there was an announcement of a 25% steel tariff and a 10% aluminum tariff, and the rules are kind of shaky right now. Originally, it excluded Canada and Mexico, and then in May, the government put Canada and Mexico back in, but they did exclude Argentina, Brazil, Australia, South Korea. So not sure what's going on there, but what immediately happens when you start to see those tariffs is, yes, it protects the industries in the U.S., but at the point that the tariffs are implemented, the U.S. Steel and aluminum industries raise their pricing because there's no more competition. Mm-hmm. So you're really actually creating monopolies and sort of market collusion just by putting the tariffs in. So now the price point of everything raises, and that concerns me in a couple ways. For the overall economy, I get worried, and I get worried because as you start to see steel and aluminum are really great examples. Digital cars, washing machines are a different example because they have their own tariff. Solar panels have their own tariff. But if you start to look at what's made of steel and aluminum, a lot of industries like automotive, appliances, tools, all start to go up in price. That's combined with a labor market that's running almost at full employment. And in full employment, people are leaving jobs to go to other jobs because they're unfilled, and they're making more money, and the labor prices are rising along with material prices. So I'm seeing that, somewhere down the line within the next 15, 18 months, we're probably going to see some inflation. And as we see inflation, we're probably going to see the Fed start hitting the interest rates to try and slow it down, and not sure what's going to happen in the economy. So if you're a buyer and this is happening to you, you really have to think about what to do in terms of, you have to understand what are the tariffs, what products, because we're not saying, it doesn't happen, it's all steel. There's classifications and custom codes for steel and aluminum. So you have to look at where are you getting it from, what is it coming in as, how is it classified by customs, where are the tariffs applying, and you got to look to see how that's happening in your region. You also have to start thinking about is there opportunities in some of these countries that are not exempt, that are not playing to the tariff. So is there any kind of places you can go and find it? And then you have to understand the tariff enough. So back in the old days, I would look at, can I be able to bring in subcomponents and can we call it something else? Can I go to customs and get something classified differently? You really need to understand, and it's free. It's called the Harmonized Customs Code, and customs will they record everything coming into the country. So you have to look at those codes. You have to look at what's the point of origin, where's it coming from. And you got to know where your competitors getting things.
Yeah. So the harmonized customs code would be the place to go to understand if something that you're buying is actually subject to tariffs.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if all of a sudden you're seeing a bunch of steel come from a location, or a bunch of products or components come from a location, you got to wonder why. Yeah. Excuse me. You have to wonder why that's happening. Why are they all moving to Morocco to bring, or Turkey to bring in? It's not Turkey, I guess it's another problem this week. But where are they coming from, and then why is everybody seeming to move there? So a great example is I was working for a company that was bringing in porcelain toilets, and they were using a source in Malaysia. And when we looked at the harmonization code, one of the biggest sources was in Canada.
Right.
So they were getting these things on the ocean. They were breaking on the way over. And then when we looked at where else can you get these things, there were quite a few other locations that their competitors were using to bring in materials.
Now, is there any logic to what actually gets placed on, that gets a tariff placed on it? Or is it really political? Because you talked about it's not all types of aluminum, for example. And you have to look at the code to see where, which particular grades are, and I'm probably sounding like a complete amateur in terms of buying aluminum because I've never bought it before, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I do. I look at Australia, and what's happening in Australia has to be that's where a lot of the bauxite's mined. So Rio Tinto has these big bauxite plants in Australia, and so do some of the other companies. So the bauxite will be coming in, which is the raw aluminum, and then smelted here. So the question of a buyer might look at is, can I kind of buy that? Can I get the materials, or find the materials, or take my own materials and then have it remanufactured here? But you'd have to look at, why is that exempt and how does that come together? You've got that issue. The other issue, if you're a really smart sourcing manager, is, do you do something with it here, and do you ever export? So on some big tool manufacturers, they may be having a big steel tariff, but the minute they export it out, they can go to customs to get a duty drawback. Anything they paid on the tariff should come back to them, because it's not being retained.
Yeah, you can recover it. And so how much, in your experience as a procurement professional, how much can we do, and how much even can our organizations do to actually go back and negotiate with customs over tariffs being applied to products that we may be importing? Is there really something we can do, or is it above us? Is it out of our control?
No. I actually think you have to look at what's the code, what are they bringing in. I was at one time in my life, I worked in business machines. We were making printers, and my power cord was classified as power cord with a plug and a receptacle on it. And I went back and said, no, this is not that. There was no female plug, right? Because you wired it right into the machine.
Yeah.
So I went to customs and I said, this isn't the right code. And I asked them to create a code for what I had, and they did. And it was quite a bit cheaper than when I had to get the two cords. Another company I worked in, we had it was a food company, and we created they used quite a little bit of sugar in the product, and what they did was they blended it outside. They blended the product outside where you got the world's sugar price, and the U.S. price was 40 cents, the world price was 15 cents. They brought it in as a whole different component. It was reclassified as a whole different component.
Yeah,
it was a food blend, and it came in under the sugar quota. So you have to think about how can you work with these things. At one time, I remember I was in the food business, and we were it was the term of Jimmy Carter, and peanuts were regulated,
right,
kind of like sugar is now.
Uh-huh.
And when I studied the market for one of my clients, we found that everybody was going to Virginia, buying the seed, taking it to Argentina, which has the same growing climate, and then they were bringing it in, putting it in warehouses, bonded warehouses, and the day that the peanut quota opened, because you're allowed to bring in so much, they emptied their warehouses and the quota was filled in 2 days. Right. So, some of the big candy makers and things like that, they staged all these peanuts across the country in bonded warehouses, and the minute the quota opened, they took their peanuts out, and they had lower cost of product than domestic peanuts. Because the government was regulating the price of domestic peanuts. So you really have to understand the category. Just like any strategy you're going to build, you have to understand the category. You've got to really look at the category. You've got to look at how does this tariff affect me? What happens if you convince a supplier to bring it over here and do local content? Mm-hmm. How does that change the process? And you're starting to see, you saw Harley Davidson leave to go to Europe to ease themselves on the tariffs on motorcycles. Some of our suppliers, you'll start to see supply chains start to move around too. And we want to look at when and how are the supply chains moving, and when is it to our advantage to get them to work with us in a different way.
So just on that point, as you look at perhaps re-engineering the supply chain, is a tariff applied to something based on its its port of origin? So something can be manufactured in South Korea, let's say, and it's actually shipped to the UK and then the UK to the US. Are they going to put a tariff on based on it coming from the UK, or are they going to go all the way back to the point of original manufacture in South Korea and apply tariffs based on that?
That's been the shell game that many people played over the years, to move stuff between origins. To one, get tax advantages, or secondly, to be able to claim it from a different origin. It's supposed to have its original origin, but it's good. It would be difficult to see if you got all your steel from South Korea, it would be really difficult to understand where the origin is.
Yeah. As I think about. It may be easier to understand your exposure when you're buying directly. A lot of the things, obviously, we buy have a lot of subcomponentry and materials that go into them that are then manufactured by somebody else, and we're buying an assembly or a sub-assembly. In your experience, how open have those contract manufacturers and suppliers been to actually sharing, kind of supporting you in the mitigation of cost increases that occur to them because of the tariffs, as opposed to them just trying to pass it on to you as a cost increase?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the minute the tariffs were announced, anybody that had steel components in their product were writing the letters. The letters were coming in about tariffs and increases and all the things that they had, as well as the domestic steel people who were talking about they had to raise their price to be competitive, which was bizarre.
Yeah, especially when they're now in a more favorable market environment when their competitors are faced with these tariffs. But because
they had no competition,
right? The competition's been taken, and it's something you said earlier, which is actually quite worrisome. That you can have been loyal to a US manufacturer, and now that same supplier is raising the prices by, I'm just making a number up, let's say it's 20% because the tariffs are 25%. Sure. So it's still a lower cost for you to go with them than go and import. But because they don't have the competition that you mentioned before, it gives them essentially a lot more pricing power. And so you're getting disadvantaged for actually being loyal to those suppliers in the instances where that's happening.
Well, this is where the cost model comes into play, because you really have to know how much of the content is material. So let's say they want to pass through a 20% increase because of steel. Well, steel may only be a 20 or 30, 15 or 20% component in the total cost. So you really got to jump on them and make sure that you're calculating what's the steel, what's the tariff impact. It's not going to be the full 20%. It's going to be a percent of the percent. The percent of the content material versus the percent of the increase that they're claiming.
Yeah, it may only be 5% of the input cost, and they're trying to pass on a 20% cost increase.
Or as much as they can. I mean, I had that happen to me one time where I was in the food business, and the supplier came came in with a price increase based on an increase in active resin. And when I did the calculation, his price increase came out 5 digits over. It was like 0.0005 something. And so I set it down, said, here's the content of your material. Here's what the cost is. Here's what the cost increase is. I'll give you 0.00005 cents per unit. And the guy just said, forget it. But you got to be smart enough. You got to use your cost models.
Yeah.
You got to be on top of the materials. You got to be on top of the global origin of this thing. You got to be on top of how much of it's going back out. How much can you recover? And a lot of companies fail to do that. I was working recently with a company buying uniforms, and they bring them in and then distribute them out and only keep about 10% of them in the U.S. And if apparel is starting to get those tariffs, then they're due all that tariff money back because it didn't stay in the U.S. So really the tariff is a tax on goods coming overseas into the U.S. So if you're sending it back out, you really need to have some organization. You really need to understand the customs laws. You really need to understand where's the stuff coming in and who's the importer of origin, where's the port of entry that it's coming at. You really need to be on top of that, because if you're not, then you're going to be taken advantage of, and you're going to be at competitive disadvantage. You need to be able to articulate that back to suppliers. You got to be sending a conditioning message to the suppliers that you're only going to take pass through. I'd be creating the business case, and I'm doing the cost analysis on the domestic suppliers, because I want to go back to them and prove that their costs have not risen that much.
Yeah, and not only just taking the pass-through cost, but I think a commitment from them to actually work with you to find ways to eliminate where possible, through re-engineering, or through going different sources, or perhaps looking at different materials and things, as opposed to them just saying, hey, it's a cost that I've been hit with, here you are, I'm going to pass it on to you.
In many cases, it's not. It's been a gift they've been given.
Yeah. Well, as I think...
to be honest with you.
Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I'm just going to say it's a gift they're given. I mean, now the market's at a different point, and they can raise the prices because they don't have any lower competition. They don't have anybody to fight off.
Yeah. So as I think proactively then, when those circumstances occurred, what could we have done to protect ourselves from that? So contractually, they're not allowed to, there's protections to stop them from going and doing that.
Well, there is. There's contract terms and then length of contract and some most favored nation clauses sometimes help. But the thing I don't know if they're going to try force majeure or not. That was a question I saw the other day.
Yeah.
Is a tariff a case of force majeure? I don't know. But I think the other thing that sourcing managers can do to help themselves is, if you've been not a very good customer with a supplier, and now the supplier's in a really good position, you're probably going to be on the lower end of the stick. You've got to make sure that your relationships are strong, that the suppliers are integrated with your business plan. You got to be presenting what is the long-term position and where are we going to be, and you also have to be looking for. I hate to say this, but whenever you have a sort of a try not to say colluded market, but whenever you have a sort of an organized market, then you want to find the weak link. And one of the games that the suppliers will definitely play is everybody will play the market price, but some people will be offering rebates and things like free goods and things like that, just so that they can stay in that market and say everybody's paying it, but they're going to have rebate structures and different structures. So if you're a good category manager and you have a good relationship with that supplier, you should be working on alternate structures for pricing, because you don't want to kill the supplier's not going to kill the market, but they might help you change a slight piece of the market to your advantage.
Yeah, I guess.
But it all depends about relationship and
it's no. I was going to say it's all supplier relationship management, isn't it? And how you've treated those suppliers who are particularly important to you. Well, one, that are important to you, that where this has a big impact. But frankly, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to at least treat all of your suppliers with trust and respect. How you've been treating them really comes home to roost in situations like this, doesn't it? Because they will,
really does.
There's things they can do, and they will do it for you, or they'll do it for your competitor, and it depends on where they feel the better long-term business relationship is.
I can give you a great example. I was working with one client one time, and they were making actually plastic moldings for your house and windows and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to cut a deal, and the market changed radically. I want to say on polystyrene. And at one point, the market had increased 40%, and the supplier was begging them for help because every pound of material that they made for this company, they would lose money on. And they called me and said, "What do you think we should do?"
Yeah.
And I looked at them and said, "What's the right thing to do? If they're losing money on every ounce of product they send you, how long do you think this relationship
How's that
will
sustainable?
last when the market turns the other way?"
Mm-hmm.
It's not. So they finally did a price concession and gave them some relief on the market. So if you haven't been doing that, you've held your feet to the ground, you haven't worked with suppliers when you need to, then it's going to be a tough time for you.
Yeah.
But the relationship again helps. And I've had suppliers come to me in terms of allocation and not allocate the amount that they should have to me, or not take product away when they should have. So it all depends on how good are you, how integrated. It doesn't mean being very soft on the supplier, but it certainly means having some kind of agreement at senior levels and across the business for what's the relationship and how does it work. And, and what's fair.
Fair is the word I was thinking of. And also, when the business cycle changes, it's all very well talking about having a strong relationship and having investing in your suppliers when you as an organization are at the part of the business cycle where maybe you're throwing off some more cash. What's really important is how do you treat those same suppliers when you're struggling and you're looking, under the rugs for pennies. Are you actually going to keep? Are you going to treat them with that same respect and keep that trust and work strategically with them, or are you just going to send them a letter and demand for 15% cost reductions? And the fact and how you're doing that, I think, has a really big impact then on do they really trust you, and so how are they really going to react when they have an opportunity to take advantage of you?
Yeah, I know we've come off a little bit about the specific tariffs, but there's kinds of things that really supply managers have to think about, and they really have to think about their cost model, percent of content.
Mm-hmm.
How do they manage the imports? What are they doing in terms of where does the product go? How does it get passed down the supply chain? How does it get returned back if we're sending it outside? If there's there used to be labor content laws where in Europe you used to have 40% of your labor put into. We used to have 40% of our labor put into the products.
Mm-hmm.
Send all the components and have them built. So we have to understand all of those dynamics, and it's not an easy job. It's a job that requires someone to do a lot of detail and understand the whole dynamics of the supply market, the economic market, because you really got to be keeping your eye on the ball. You got to be conditioning suppliers against the price increase. You got to be on top of it so that you can articulate and argue what's fair and not fair for you. And you got to have the supplier relationship that's good enough to help you find the rebate structures and things you need to find to get through these tough times. How it applies.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how other countries react and respond to protect themselves. Probably, using tools like you say that it's not just return tariffs, but there's other tools that they can use to protect their markets, to protect their suppliers, and to perhaps try and levy punishment on the countries that are putting taxes. So definitely we're
seeing that now.
Yeah.
We're seeing it with China. We're seeing it with Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's happening now.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about Brexit and how that's going to play and what's going to happen there, it's going to be extremely interesting. I know I found the tariff on soybeans and agricultural products pretty interesting because what we did was we came up with a relief package for the farmers. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, with your knowledge of purchasing, how's that going to help?
Yeah. It doesn't, does it?
That stuff's going into silos and storage lockers.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen next year when they grow soybeans?
Yeah.
Now they got twice the amount of soybeans or whatever product they have, and it's going to depress the market. Commodities are going to go.
We had that in the UK and across Europe, and you'd end up then all the food going to waste because they didn't want to flood the market, because they wanted to keep prices, hold on to the pricing structures. And by flooding the market, then would just decimate the market, basically.
Definitely. If you've just got to empty out the silos and you actually have
flood the market
somewhere, animal feed or somewhere, maybe you see the price of beef and stuff come down. But, you just have to think about it. Giving an aid package is one thing, but the material is still going to be there.
Yeah, it'll all end up in the bottom
that's at least my thinking.
Yeah, it'll end up in the bottom of one of the Great Lakes.
I hope not. That's my thinking. That doesn't really help when you've got commodities as well. But you're taxing the commodities, or you're not shipping the commodities, and then you get the law of supply and demand, and sooner or later the supply is going to exceed demand, and we're going to drop like a rock. And just like I think the material prices and the labor markets are going to impact the economy. The other one thing I haven't mentioned is, as we impact the economy, and if we start to see inflation, if we start to see interest rate changes, I think you have another dynamic too, which is all of these suppliers and the front end of the supply chain. Then the worst I've seen is a stretching of 180 days. Payment terms. Mm-hmm. But as you start to see inflation, when money's free, then it's pretty easy to support long 120, 90, 180 day terms. When money starts costing, when the money starts costing you a lot of money, then you're not going to be able to afford having those payment terms. And I'm not quite sure how they're all going to return back to normal, if they ever do. And if they don't, then you're going to see a lot of stress on the front end of the supply chain.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how if the usage of tools, and I know that there's others out there, and I only reference their name because I've one of our suppliers for my business has used it, which is Tolia. Where you are, you basically can bring forward your payment days and you pay a certain amount to do so, but it helps you with your cash flow. I wonder if we're going to see more and more of that, to at least enable some of the providers in the supply chain to access that cash earlier, even when from a buyer perspective, you're pushing out to 90 or 120 days.
Cash is king, so you've got two things happening. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of systems designed with dynamic terms. So here's supplier, you pick when you want to get paid. And here are the discount terms that go along with those payments. So that's one thing I've seen. And the other thing I've seen is a lot of companies actually forwarding the money or floating the money up front. So Walmart, I understand Walmart and a couple of pharma companies, Procter & Gamble, have and I know a couple other companies that also have a third party that actually floats the loans to the buyers. But as interest goes up, I'm sure those will go up too.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bill, it sounds like there's a lot of it's interesting times. So there's going to be a lot to keep on top of in the next. Well, it seems like it's month by month because the situation is changing pretty quickly, and it's only deteriorating in terms of the tariffs that are being levied left, right, and centre. So now certainly is a time to be on top of understanding what your potential exposure is, and how you can start doing things in advance of actually getting hit by a tariff so that you can respond as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And if I was a CPO, I'd be wanting all the detail on, the tariff, the material content. I'd be wanting to know where are the origin, where are the places that are exempt, what are the options domestically. I'd want to be asking my category manager to come back with a detailed strategy and sourcing plan for all those things, and I'm sure they are. Yeah, I'm sure the good CPOs are on it.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for your time. The last question, which I always say is the easy one, is if listeners would like to reach out, connect with you directly, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Certainly, it's bill.michels, that's MICHELS at CIPS.org.
Okay. That's an easy one. I'll put that in our show notes. Yeah. And I'll also include a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can connect with you there.
Great.
That's going to be at artofprocurement.com/2018 tariffs. That's artofprocurement.com/2018 tariffs. Bill, thank you very much for joining me. Hi there, Art of Procurement listeners. It's Phil here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm excited to share with you the new offer we've been working on. It's called the Catalyst Co-Platform, or TCP. So TCP is a distillation, curation, and contextualization of all the conversations we've had here at Art of Procurement and through our weekly newsletter. We also incorporate the content of others from both inside and outside of our community. And TCP, it's all about taking action. It's about leveling up. It's about enhancing our impact as a community and as individual professionals. The TCP provides a safe space and tools that we can use to generate value for our teams and for ourselves. It brings structure and what we call facilitated accountability to the way that we learn, develop, and validate new ideas. Based on the work we've done in the enterprise space and the feedback that we've received from many in the community, we designed TCP with a bias towards dynamic, actionable content and interactions that require no more than a few minutes of your time every day. It's not about checking boxes, and it's not for everyone. But if you're the kind of professional that sees themselves as a catalyst and prioritizes effectiveness over productivity, then TCP may be for you. We are now taking applications for early access to our flagship TCP program. This early access program will only be available between now and September the 15th and is limited to just 50 individuals. For the early access application form, or to find out more about our team and enterprise versions, please go to artofprocurement.com/TCP. That's artofprocurement.com/TCP, or click the link in the sidebar of the artofprocurement.com homepage. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and I will see you again next week.